Deal.
Hey, YouTube. Yep, this is the story of a deal. Let me open up by talking about my grandfather. My grandfather was a collector of some repute. I'm not bragging. He did it all. I didn't do anything except slobber on his stuff. Towards the end of his life, he would get visits once a quarter, once every 3 months, from a guy from the Smithsonian Institution and a guy from the Library of Congress. Okay. And they just did it just to sit around, chat a little bit, see what else he might have bought or see what else he might have pulled out of his closet and whether or not he still had that powder horn that was carved during the siege of Boston, or those muster rolls that showed the first black dude ever to join the United States military. Okay. Grandpa wasn't a rich man, not a man of means at all. He was a handyman, but he was a very discerning and disciplined collector. There were two things my grandfather said that stick inside my mind. One is, and I'll have to grab the pipe because I'm going to do an impression of my grandfather here. I probably heard this phrase more than anything else from my grandfather. I knew it was old, so I bought it. That's my granddad. Okay, my cousins, my brothers, my sisters, or when they watch this video, if they watch this video, they're going to say, they're all going to be laughing, they're all going to be pointing, and then going to say, yeah. The other thing he did was advice on collecting. And he said, we don't get this stuff to own it. We get it to take care of it for the next guy. If you're lucky, you get a story you can tell. And with this deal here, I got lucky. I've got a story I can tell. Now, Plato says that the beginning is the most important part. And to quote Julie Andrews, the beginning is a very good place to start, so we'll start in the beginning, and I will say, this is all James Bender's fault. Okay, about 2 years ago, before Squirrel Camp 2024, I bought a shepherd stove. There are videos on the channel about the shepherd stove. And I bought that so that I could cook at Squirrel Camp. And in order to get some money to buy other things to go with that shepherd stove, I put up a few things for sale on Bannerman's Camp. I just said, hey, I got this, you want to buy it? And one of them was a reflector oven, probably from the 1950s. I hadn't used it. I was more interested in baking with the shepherd stove, and James bought it from me. And then at Squirrel Camp, just before Squirrel Camp, I, with great overconfidence, challenged James to a baking duel. And I burned the biscuits, and his were fantastic. So, thus, I became devastated by shame, green with envy, and I started looking for a reflector stove. Well, I was unsuccessful in my quest. I found a lot of reflector stoves that were way overpriced for what they were, vintage stoves. I found a lot of modern takedown folding reflector stoves that would have been okay if all I wanted to do was cook in the woods. But I want to cook in the woods 100 years ago. So I want something that either looks exactly like a vintage piece or is a vintage piece. Well, about 2 months ago, one of the members on Bannerman's camp posted this picture of some stuff he had just acquired. One of them was an Abercrombie's camp reflector stove. Friends, that is when the palpitations ensued. Okay? I hadn't seen palpitations like that since that first time I saw that Farrah Fawcett poster from the 1970s. And those palpitations continued. So I upped my feverish search for a vintage reflector oven and was still unsuccessful because I knew that Abercrombie and Fitch, or Abercrombie's camp, not Abercrombie and Fitch, that Abercrombie's camp reflector oven had some value because it has the added cachet of being Abercrombie camp, not just a reflector oven. But after another couple weeks of that, I decided, okay, I'm going to see if this guy wants to do a deal. His name is Joe. I will reference Joe from now on. Now, it just so happens that Joe had seen my folding handle skillet, steel skillet, in one of my videos or in a picture that I had posted to Bannerman's camp. I don't know where he saw it, but he knew I had it. And he is a disciplined collector as well because he is collecting skillets. Okay. And the folding skillet I had was what is known in the collector's world as a no-name folding handle skillet. It basic features, it's got a spout on both sides. Okay, and it's got a nice folding handle. It's got a patent date, but no manufacturer, and that's why we call it the no-name folding handle skillet. Well, so I contacted him and asked him if he wanted to work out some kind of trade for that reflector oven. Timing was good because he wanted that skillet. Now, I could have probably done a 1-to-1 trade for the skillet traded for the Abercrombie and the Abercrombie's camp reflector oven. Okay, but the value of that oven is a little bit higher than the skillet, and I didn't want to really take advantage of him. Okay, and I didn't want to get rid of the skillet. Okay, because my purpose here really is to build an impression of a outfitter cooking for clients out in the woods. Okay, that's why I got that folding stove from James Bender, and to see if I could beat him baking biscuits at the next squirrel camp. But we'll set that aside. So we went back and forth. He wanted the skillet, I wanted the folding oven, but I didn't want to get rid of the skillet until I could get a skillet from myself. Okay, but the way we sent pictures back and forth. Okay, I got this. How about this? I've got one of those. I've got two of those. I don't really need that. Really couldn't get to it, and I really wanted that oven, and he really wanted that skillet. But after going through the garage and mini warehouse trying to find a bunch of stuff I wanted to, I felt like I could cut loose of. I realized that this deal wasn't going to go anywhere unless it hurt me just a little bit. Because I knew that it was going to hurt Joe just a little bit, and I wanted us both to hurt just a little bit to get what we wanted. So what I did was, as I came in here into the cabin, over here on the desk, and grabbed something that had been sitting there for about a year and a half. Kept it close so that I could fondle it a little bit every now and again. And it was my Campus 3 alcohol stove. The only way it could have hurt me more is if I had gone with my 71E. But I knew it had value. He had already, and this is another part of the story, he had already offered to include this skillet. Okay, this skillet, let me see if we can get my glasses so I can see what I'm seeing. This is a great skillet. Okay, it is a wherever folding handle skillet. That makes it rare. It is also from Abercrombie's Camp. Oh, let me turn that upside down so you can read it. Okay, Abercrombie's Camp. Wherever. Okay, it's another great piece. It's another one of high value. And now he has offered me two things of high value, and he kicked in something that I actually appreciate. It's the one thing I appreciate the most out of this whole deal. And then his first edition of Camping and Woodcraft by Horace Kephart. This I treasure. Okay. Also included in the deal. So that's what was included in the deal. What was included in the deal was the Abercrombie's Camp reflector oven, the Abercrombie's Camp skillet, and the first edition of Kephart. Okay. I offered him in return, we settled in return that he would get that no-name double spout steel folding handle skillet. That's got high value. And my Campus 3, which that's a high value item as well. Okay, they only about 3 or 4 of them ever show up a year. I waited a couple of years before I got it. Like I said, I knew that if I wanted to get what I wanted, it's going to have to hurt a little bit. It's got a good home. Okay, now, like all these deals, another thing my grandfather used to say is, the best deal is one where both guys think they got over on the other guy. Okay, and it's probably true here. Both of us figure that they got more from the other guy than the other guy gave. Okay, and like good collectors, we feel guilty about that. So when I opened up the box, he had included a Boy Scout mess kit with a steel skillet, because he knew I wanted a steel skillet, and this Abercrombie's Camp skillet is aluminum. And he tossed in a dough cutter and a couple of baking pans, a couple of mini loaf baking pans. Now, let's add another wrinkle to this. Okay, he's got his stuff, I've got my stuff. We're both happy. We're both ecstatic. You will see the reflector oven in an upcoming video. Okay, this is a story about the deal, not really about the stuff. But this skillet, and this is where it gets great. He acquired this skillet in a trade with Dave Canterbury at this year's squirrel camp, which I wasn't able to attend. Okay. And Dave, well, like all trades, once you get home, you regret having made the trade, even though you love what you just got. Okay, you had to cut loose of something. And about the same time as I was doing this deal, David called me up to ask about these skillets he's making. He made a deal for a bunch of cold handle skillets, and some of them had really bad, nasty handles that he didn't feel right selling. But he could put folding handles on them at his forge. And he wanted to know if that was something that would be acceptable as a classic camping piece. And I told him, absolutely, absolutely. That kind of repair is just the kind of thing that folks on the farm and the ranch would have done in the 1920s, particularly in the early part of the 20th century. But most farms and ranches had a shop on them to do that kind of heavy-duty work, even though they didn't do it every day. If you needed to rivet something, if you needed to sew heavy canvas, if you needed to turn wood or something like that, there was a lathe, there was a welder, there was a forge, there was something, all of that stuff on a smaller scale was in the farm and ranch shop or your neighbors. Okay? So those skillets that Dave is selling, he may have sold out by now, those are all acceptable for classic camping. And of course I told him, and then once he found out, because later on in the conversation I told him I was doing this deal with Joe, once he found out that I had gotten the skillet that he had traded with Joe for, he says to me, "Hey, you want to trade that skillet for a couple of my folding handle skillets that I'm making?" I said, "Sure, I'd rather have a steel skillet than an aluminum one." Okay? I love this stuff. I love this stuff. I love how this turns out. We went from James Bender stealing my glory, I tell you, at Squirrel Camp 2024 when I burned my biscuits and he made some great biscuits, robbing me of my rightful title as the best biscuit baker. All started at 2 years ago and ended up with a trade that Dave Canterbury had made, and now he's got his stuff back. Now all I got to do is figure out some way to get my skillet back from Joe without him getting the reflector oven, or actually to get my Campus 3. I wonder what I got in the mini warehouse that he wants to trade back. Now, anyway. Let me say that this is the kind of thing that I'm very glad how the Facebook group Bannerman's Camp has turned out. I've said this before. The personal relationships that all of us are making with each other on that site, of having this common interest in collecting and how it all intersects with collecting camping gear and living history and bushcraft and all of that stuff, backpacking, all of it kind of meshes together to where everybody who has not necessarily the same interests, backpackers, living historians, bushcrafters, collectors, Model T, vintage vehicle owners, we all find this area where we're all interested, okay, and we're able to make deals using these personal connections. So I thought you might want to hear this story. I love this story. You know, like I said, it's probably the best part of the entire deal is a story I get to tell. We'll see you down the trail.